one play at a third time. So let's not focus on the great game. Let's focus on the great play. Let's play with passion, let's play with love, let's play with responsibility, let's play with respect for one another.
How you feel? How you feel?
Morning. I don't want you to focus on, because if I ask you right now, do you want to have a great game? All y'all will say yes, right? I want you to focus on, I want to have a great play. I want to have a great play. Then the next play, I want to have.
We are back with Championship Weekend Celebration Bowl, and it is finally, but sadly, it is coming to an end for HBCU football. But one, we got to recap last week because it was a good one. I think we all predicted it. Prairie View came out with the win. Michael, what are your thoughts on that? Because I know you were the main ones that you kind of put the spark in my head that you said, look, you go watch, you and Nate, you said, look, watch out for Prairie View. That offense is high power. You've been telling me this since they played in the State Fair. Michael, what are your thoughts on this game?
Well, fellas. New champion of the 2025 SWAC season, and that's the Prairie View A&M Panthers, a.k.a., if I remember correctly, what them Prairie View fans be calling down there, Nate, the Hill. Yep. I remember correctly, that's what they call themselves down there. But to somehow let up, here's the introduction. Prairie View A&M Panthers upset Jackson State Tigers 23-21 on December 6th in Jackson, Mississippi, led by, man, I can't wait to talk about this guy, quarterback Cameron Peters, 394 total yards with 294 passing yards, plus, here it is, 100 yards rushing and 2 scores, ending Jackson State's title defense and sending Prairie View to the Celebration Bowl. Now, key moments include Prairie View leading early and Jackson State fighting back in the second half, but it came short. So Prairie View secured their win with clutch plays, which means now Prairie View A&M Panthers have now earned their first SWAC title since 2009. Now, Deuce, you asked me what are my thoughts, and honestly, it was a heck of a ball game. It was a heck of an environment. We've all said that. But it's one thing that I got to say before I even go any further. I specifically said that every team has a weakness. And me and Nate were just talking about this before this came up. Every team has a weakness. And what's going to determine this game is that which team weakness is going to affect them, which team losing effect is going to cause them to lose this game due to their weakness. And I hate to say it, but it all came down to Jackson State. Prairie View had opportunities to extend the game, and Prairie View showed their weaknesses too. But
yeah, I did write that. Look, I wrote that. The fumbles, the turnovers. Prairie View had 3 fumbles that I think kept Jackson State in the game closer than what it should have been. Look, Prairie View they did have time of possession. They had the ball for about 38 minutes, I believe. I wrote it down here somewhere in my notes. I can't find it, but look, they had the ball for, I know, way longer than Jackson State. I think like 38 minutes or something. Mm-hmm. But I say they had 3 turnovers. 3 fumbles, I believe, and that kept Jackson State in the game. I believe if those turnovers didn't happen, Prairie View could have probably win and score down a little bit more. Prairie View's offense throughout the game was I believe throughout they were really moving the offense through Cameron Peters and Josiah Rockwell. He came out with some pretty big clutch plays that got Prairie View in range to score in the first quarter, and I believe in the third quarter, I believe too. I gotta rewatch the highlights, and I gotta look through my notes. It's been a long day, y'all. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. But look, I wrote down this, Michael, I'm gonna get this back to you really quick, but I wrote down some positives for Prairie View. Cameron Peters, third down efficiency, explosive plays, mainly to Josiah Rockwell. You had a 45-yard pass and a 20-yard pass. Then I had the negatives, fumbles. The fumbles kept it a close game, but PV looked better than Jackson State, in my opinion. But Jackson State they look like the team that still compete for that championship. We said this, you can't count out Jackson State, and we also said you can't count out Prairie View. Prairie View, I think in this game, they look like the team they look like the better team. But I feel like Jackson State still had, I'm gonna say, how do I want to say? Because I did say in the third quarter, it looked like Jackson State started to get their momentum back. They got a touchdown. The game got close. It got loud. It started rocking again. I told you on the group chat, I said, this game is getting close. Jackson State's starting to get momentum. I think Jackson State, that played a huge faction to Jackson State's, that and their defense. Their defense, and I'm going to say this, their offense, it kind of, after Jacoby and Morgan got hurt, and, at first it was a close game, but then I'm going to say this, it was a close game throughout, but when Jacoby and Morgan got hurt, I think their offense, Jackson State's offense kind of stalled for a little bit. We didn't really see nothing going until the third quarter when, Jackson State started to really score again. And I'm not trying to take nothing away from their backup, but I just feel like until the third quarter, really both offenses stalled. They did have big plays, but once again, turnovers hurt Prairie View. Jackson State, I just feel like they weren't capitalizing off of Prairie View's turnovers when it came down to it. Nate, I'm gonna pass it off to you because I got to read some more of these notes because I know I have some more.
Yeah,
it's
too crazy. Looking at it, bro, the whole breakdown of it all, like when we talk about the build up, of course, we can talk about the atmosphere, the bands for Jackson State being Jackson State and Prairie View, the Storm versus the Sonic Boom going through. So that's a whole nother matchup in itself. And then you bring the two teams with Tremaine Jackson and T.C.Taylor. I'm not gonna lie. We know when Jacoby and Morgan got hurt, and that was during the Las Vegas HBCU Classic, and we said we're hoping that he is able to recover. But the amount of recovering time, it took you all the way to the SWAC championship game. You had rode with Jared Lockhart for a majority of the time. He didn't get co-freshman of the year for no reason. He played his butt off. He's throwing for 150 yards for the last 5-6 games of the season. And I think the game plan, a lot of times the majority of times what I've seen, and at least from when Grambling had played Jackson State last year in 2024, when Jackson State didn't stick with one quarterback and they tried to run a dual system, or they didn't, it wasn't necessarily they were running a dual system, but you ran with Jacoby and Morgan. And of course he may have been practicing, but Jerry Lockhart has been the guy the whole time. So as far as Jackson State, I'm not going to question. I don't question T.C.Taylor's ability to put his quarterbacks in the right situation. But to start off the game, I just feel like Jared Lockhart should have been in there. And Tremaine Jackson, bro, this guy actually is just he's beyond. He's a philosopher. He's a coach. He's a preacher. He's somebody that doesn't right. Like he's one of those coaches like he the way you play football, you live, eat, and you breathe this, and you do this out on the field and off the field. Like he talked about a lot of different things on the podcast I watched, but that all goes into the discipline from this Prairie View team. The discipline from this team, we talked about it, Michael, was going to be based off the weaknesses of both of these teams. Can these wide receivers of Prairie View step up in the big moments when the pressure is coming at them? Can the DBs of Jackson State step up as well when the pressure is coming up with them? A lot of times, Prairie View was very disciplined when it came to man coverage in their secondary. Jackson State, what killed them was they decided to play zone for pretty much 60% of the time. And then that's when you see a lot of DBs going for ball hawking instead of actually staying on men. And that's when you got staying on that man. And that's when you got these explosions. So it all kind of folded how we expected it to be as far as the defensive battle. I know we thought about it being a 30-point game, but the discipline on defense from Prairie View is ultimately, I think, of course, Cam Peters had his show, but the defense and discipline from Prairie View was probably the main factor over everything because of the simple fact, it was just, you had more of a collective effort over there. But Cam Peters, Prairie View, I'm not going to lie. Y'all lived and y'all died by Cam Peters this past weekend for a fact. With 100 rush yards, 1 rushing TD, a pass TD, and 294 yards, y'all lived and died. So when it comes, we'll get more a little bit into it as far as the Celebration Bowl, but there is going to be a strong, heavy task coming upon Prairie View when they go to Atlanta.
It's gonna be the same thing that I literally said for the SWAC championship game. It's no different from the SWAC championship game. The Celebration Bowl is gonna basically kind of be like the SWAC championship game. What I mean by that is which team weaknesses is gonna show up. in the Celebration Bowl. You know, I mean, South Carolina State, they got their weaknesses. Prairie View got their weaknesses. I mean, like you just said, dudes, they had 3 turnovers. And then not only that, both teams had 8 penalties throughout this game. So, you know, the weaknesses were shown in this game. I mean, like you said, Prairie View, 3 turnovers, right? Dead center with penalties, 8. I think Prairie View had the most with 82 yards on penalties compared to Jackson State 78. I mean,
I'll stop
78.
you real quick, Mike.
What's up?
Jackson State, actually, we know them for having the number 1 rushing offense in the SWAC. They only had 84 rushing yards. You know, with the talented trio they had back there, only had 84.
For sure. And then you got to think about this too. 3rd down efficiency. Prairie View 10 of 21 compared to, Jackson State's 2 of 10. 4th down conversions. Prairie View 1 of 3 to Jackson State's. You know, they 1 and 1. They converted.
Look, I hate to cut you off, Michael. Look, I think offensively, Prairie View just came into the game. They had a game plan. They had a system of how they were gonna, they were gonna play against Jackson State. And throughout the game, I mean, the whole offense, and yes, they had their mishaps, they had their fumbles, but I mean, the offense should look comfortable from the get-go, from the first drive, even though they didn't score, we seen Cam Peters, he was moving the ball, completed some passes, he even rushed. When I seen him take off for his first rush, y'all mentioned that he had over 100 yards. This offense was moving, the system was going through Cam Peters from the get-go, and he executed perfection. Look, Josiah Rockwell, we said this all year. Look, he's a playmaker. He didn't win. I think it was freshman. Nate, what was the award that he won?
I think that might have been Chase Bingman. They got
that may have been Chase Bingman. Look,
yeah.
But look, I'm gonna say this about Rockwell. Look, he did. I do know this for sure. He did hit over 1,000 yards.
Oh, excuse me, sorry. Rockwell actually, he was 2nd team all SWAC.
Yes.
Yeah, he was all SWAC.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say this. Look, 2nd team all SWAC, 1,000 yards on the year. He hit 1,000 yards in the championship game. He stepped up when needed to. And I say this, I mentioned this earlier. He had a 45-yard completion and a 20-yard completion in big moments when needed that set Prairie View up to score. I think I'm gonna say this. Y'all mentioned the defense, but the offense. This offense, I think, in my opinion, I'm not gonna say it looked the best because I think their offense it peaked when they played Alabama State, in my opinion. But this offense looked, in my offense, also up there. I think this offense looked like when they played Alabama State, this offense came to play. I'm still at a loss of words because look, I did not come in. I'm gonna be honest with you. I did not come into this podcast expecting to talk a lot about Prairie View. Like Jackson State, they got upset. So Prairie View, I'm gonna say this real quick. Prairie View, I give my shout out to y'all. Because look, I have my notes right here, but did not expect to be talking a lot about Prairie View today. Offensively, this offense came to play. I give props to Cam Peters. I said this in the State Fair Classic. He's the quarterback to look out for. This offense is a team to look out for. He's only gotten better as the season went on. The defense, I did not expect this defense to play how they did against Jackson State. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of expected Jackson State to do more on the rushing attack. Prairie View's D-line made clutch stops. They held Ahmad Miller. They held to under 100 yards. Did not expect that. I said this before also. Jackson State, I think they didn't get their really momentum into the 3rd quarter when they had them clutch touchdown. Do I think this is gonna translate over to Jackson State for next year? I think Jackson State has a lot left, and we're gonna talk about this later. I think Jackson State has a lot left brewing. We're gonna talk about head coaching and all this left.
A lot of transfers just left. I think, if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on it right now. We'll probably talk about it a little bit more on the show. But one of the running backs, if I'm not mistaken, Ahmad Miller has like 2 or 3 years. I don't know, you guys. You
gotta think about this too. A lot. Jackson State did get a lot of recruits. coming into the SWAC championship and after. So regardless of them losing players, they're still rebuilding. So you know, how many
Look,
players?
I don't even think. Look, I don't think this is going to hurt Jackson State necessarily a lot because Jackson State is still going to get a lot of recruits and a lot of transfers. We don't know how much yet because, you know, we don't get official. I think it's next week. We don't get official updates until next week or sometime around that. But Jackson State, I still think they're going to rebuild and they're going to recover from this loss. They always find their way to get back. And I said this in the comments to somebody else. Jackson State has kind of owned the SWAC in this last decade. It's kind of been theirs, whether you like it or not. They've had the most championship appearances and they've had the most Celebration Bowl appearances. It's kind of been theirs to dominate. And, you know, credit to them. I think they will be back next year. But also, I say this. I'm starting to think that teams are trying to figure out the game plan to beat Jackson State, like Prairie View, you know, and we can start to see this, you know, moving forward. I really do expect teams in Jackson State's division like FAMU. I really do expect them, you know, to start to bounce back next year. FAMU, Alabama State. I expect all these teams to really get back on their track. I think FAMU just had a down year. You know, they're known to being a top of the SWAC, in my opinion. And when they were in the
going to FIU, that's a big loss.
Yeah, you know, they're known to be at the top. I think they're just going to, when all said and done off season, I think FAMU's going to be right back up there. But I'm going to say this, Jackson State, they will recover, but I think teams are going to start to figure out the identity and the game plan to beat Jackson State. And we've seen this with Prairie View. Prairie View beat Jackson State and they exposed their weaknesses. And that's how they were able to move the offense so well. And that's how the defense was able to contain that offense. The offense has been high powered all season. And, you know, you mentioned Ahmad Miller. They literally held him to under 100 yards. A lot of teams didn't do that this offseason, but that's just my go on that. Prairie View, I keep saying this, Prairie View, shout out to y'all. I said this, that we had y'all winning, but in the back of my head, I was like this, Jackson State, they can low-key pull off the win because, and I'm still just surprised that Prairie View won. And like we said, this is their first one since 2009, I believe. So props out to Prairie View. Shout out to the alumni. I had y'all winning in the Celebration Bowl. We'll talk about that in what's called in our later segments. 38-34 will please make my prediction come true.
I will say this. And me and Nate were just talking about this, Deuce, but before you came on. I literally said this last episode. Regardless of where the SWAC championship is being played at, yes, Jackson State is playing the SWAC, is representing the SWAC championship at their home venue, without a doubt. But that does not still determine that this is still anybody's ball game. At the end of the day, you know, let's be honest here. Yes, Jackson State was playing the SWAC championship at their home venue. Yes, they were. But it's kind of like what I'm going to keep saying this. And I know I done said it about twice, but I'm going to keep saying it because it's just making a whole lot of sense now. Because, Nate, like I told you, I was just rambling. I'm going to be honest with you. I was just rambling when I said that. I'm serious. But now when I looked at the game, I was like, okay, Prairie View weaknesses are starting to show. Jackson State's weaknesses are starting to show. And I know Jackson State fans be like, what weaknesses? There were no weaknesses. Each team had a weakness, okay? Let's just go on and be honest here. Let's not see him be biased. I'm not trying to be biased. I'm keeping it real with y'all. Each team had their weaknesses. But it just really determined on which team was able to, and I said this in the group chat. I remember saying this. Every team has a weakness. But it's going to determine which team is going to be able to.
When we look at it, Mike, I think every team has a weakness, but the big emphasis in this game was we saw big plays in the air from Jackson State as well. And sometimes we saw some of the plays that Prairie View secondary gave up at the same time. It just on the other end, Jackson State secondary, you gave up way worse than what Prairie View did. So like that, it was a bend don't break type situation, and Jackson State DBs broke, and you know Prairie View's DB was able to bend a little bit, but didn't break. So that was the goal.
Now you see what I'm saying? Weaknesses. That's what I'm saying. It's not going to show up every single drive. I mean, for some teams, yes, it will. It depending on what the team is. But between Jackson State and Prairie View, the weaknesses showed up in certain situations on certain drives. And, you know, I'm just going to basically give out the game flow here for the people that didn't watch the game. first start, that early Prairie View lead. Prairie View scored first with Cameron Pierce throwing a 40-yard touchdown pass to Cameron Bonner and rushing for a 7-yard score in the first quarter. Now, Jackson State's comeback. This is the second point. Jackson State fought back in the second half, making it a tight contest. Third thing, defensive battle. We talked about that throughout this first start of this podcast. Despite Jackson State's push, Prairie View's defense held strong, preventing the Tigers from securing back-to-back titles. Last thing, clutch performance. Prairie View's ability to overcome injuries and Jackson State's home field advantage highlighted their resilience. So, with Prairie View going to Atlanta for the Celebration Bowl, it's the same kind of thing with South Carolina State and Prairie View. Weaknesses. Which team's weaknesses is going to show up? And here it is, y'all. Which team's weaknesses which team is going to be able to fight through those weaknesses regardless? Because like I said, every team has the weaknesses. But what determines ball games nowadays is that which team can fight through those weaknesses, fix those weaknesses, and win the ball game. Because there are a lot of teams who, once they have weaknesses, they can't fix them, and that's what causes them to lose ball games. So if you were to ask me what's the main topic of this Celebration Bowl, it's that which team weaknesses are going to show up and which teams is going to be able to fight through those weaknesses to win the ball game. I could go down the list with positives and negatives, but I'm just going to give y'all 2 negatives and 2 positives for Prairie View. First positive, offensive dominance. Prairie View's offense accumulated a massive 494 total yards, far exceeding Jackson State's defense. Number 2, Tremaine Jackson's impact. First-year head coach led Panthers to an immediate conference title. Like I said, Deuce, we talked about this all the time. When it comes down to being a first-year coach at any level, sometimes your season can go good or it can go bad, depending on where the team is at. And Tremaine Jackson literally just proved my point. That, and Deshaun Jackson literally proved my point, is that you could be a first-year head coach, but it's all about how you're able to teach the game and your players respond to your teaching. Football is a lecture. Football is a class and it's a lecture. So when you have a coach that can come in like Tremaine Jackson and teach the game, like you just said, Nate, that accumulates to the players. And you see that Prairie View, right now they're 10-3. So in his first season, that does not come easy. So I think Tremaine Jackson taught these players really well. He taught them the roots of the game to now the Panthers players have wrote down that lecture and it carried on to the game. Because did we expect Prairie View to be this good, Deuce? I didn't. I can't speak for you, so I don't really know, what your thoughts were. But what I can say is that Tremaine Jackson's coaching for the Prairie View football program, I think it's a step in the right direction. And I'm going to say this now. Prairie View could be the next dangerous team in the SWAC compared to Jackson State. But like you just said, dudes, it's teams like Prairie View that are going to have to find ways to beat Jackson State. Once you find that kryptonite, it's like Superman. When Luke Slethter found that kryptonite, and let me rephrase back. When Luke Slethter found that weakness in Superman, he knew what it was and he used it against him, and he kept using it against him. So now it's teams like Prairie View that are going to have to find Jackson State's kryptonite. And regardless, I give all praise to Jackson State. I got all love for Jackson State fans. But I got to be honest here. It was a clutch win for the Panthers. And hopefully it's teams like the Panthers that can find Jackson State's kryptonite and be the next front runners in the SWAC championship. Because like I said, we need different SWAC teams every year. But I got to give a shout out to Prairie View. I got to give a shout out to Jermaine Jackson and his impact on coaching the Prairie View Panthers. And hopefully the future is bright for the Panthers. Now, let me sum all this up because I feel like I've been talking, man. I feel like I'm boring, y'all. The negatives.
No.
Inconsistency. Pre-championship. Early in the season, their rush defense allowed over 150 yards in some losses, indicating areas of improvement. Special teams. Prior to the championship game, While strong in punting and forced fumbles, they trailed Jackson State in kickoff coverage. Now, Jackson State's positives. I'm going to give you two. Season-long offensive power. Jackson State led the SWAC in total offense and rushing during the conference play. Defensive pressure. Aggressive front. Led by SWAC Defensive Player of the Year, Quincy Ivory, created a tremendous pressure and in sacks. Two negatives for Jackson State. Offensive stifle. Held to their lowest yardage, y'all. Here it is. 244 yards of the entire season by Prairie View's defense. Now, when you're able to hold an offense like Jackson State to only just 244 total yardage, that does not come easy. And that just shows you how dominant Prairie View defense was in the SWAC championship game. Now, last thing. Failed to execute. Write this down. Jackson State couldn't match Prairie View's offensive output in the championship game. So if you really look at this game, you look at the highlights, Prairie View's offense outplayed Jackson State's offense just a little bit, in my opinion.
Yeah, and look, time of possession, I say this, it played a, look, hold on. Time of possession, it played a huge part in, their win. Prairie View nearly held the ball 10 more minutes than Jackson State. They converted the ball way more. They were more efficient on third down. They moved the ball way more than Jackson State. Their offense did just about way more than Prairie View did just about more than Jackson State on their own home turf to win this game, Michael.
Yep.
Yeah, like it's a different. It was a different type of game plan because when we think about it, nobody scored in the fourth quarter. So you got to think about how much time that already had to escalate to finally, put the cherry on top. But at one point we were texting about it in our chat when Prairie View got up. It was 16-7, and then in between there, Prairie View's defense was able to step up, get stops. We saw them be opportunistic, get some interceptions from time to time, and up until that one moment, just like the one moment where Cameron Peters, he fumbled at the 1 yard line. He was trying to put the cherry on top, like I was just saying, basically seal a deal. That was one mistake, just like when they were up 16-7 and their DBs, Prairie View's DB, they allowed that one catch and run. I think if I'm not mistaken, this was the catch and run that was a penalty. It was a blindside hit, got called back, and then they went back to go score again. So amongst that, Prairie View missed all the time. They, like Deuce was saying, time of possession was just the thing that Prairie View got ahead of. They were able to get ahead on the scoreboard. They were able to get ahead in stops and get ahead in the momentum up until the moment that they did let go, and then they regrouped. Then third quarter it just became what it was, and then Tremaine Jackson, like this why leading into the Celebration Bowl, it's a different type of atmosphere. Like MEAC teams are known for going high scorching offense. We talked about Jackson State. I said it in the last podcast as well. Jackson State, this is not the same. It doesn't feel. I'm a big feel guy. If I don't feel like it's gonna be a good matchup, I told you guys this might be one of the best SWAC championship games that we might come about in the last few years, because we've been seeing Jackson State whoop everybody again and again. We got action, baby. Like the SWAC is actually changing. So when we look at it for real, the SWAC is down 3-6 when it comes to Celebration Bowls. I think Tremaine Jackson is the guy that's going to be able to turn the tables, make the chains move.
And look, I'm gonna say this: transitioning over to our Celebration Bowl segment, Prairie View's keys to win that I wrote down. Look, Prairie View, look, they scored 32 points per game. And look, Nate, you just mentioned MEAC. They're known for high scoring offense. So look, I'm thinking this is going to be a high scoring game. And I already mentioned, look, I had Prairie View winning this 38-34, but my keys for Prairie View to win, look, you got to open up the offense. You got to, look, for Prairie View, you got to really, dive into, your offense. Use your receivers, use your running backs, use your tight ends. Let Cameron Peters get the ball, move the ball. Defense, you got to force 3 and outs. You can't sleep on South Carolina State, because South Carolina State, too, they score average 31 points per game, and they're 48% on third down. So they know how to convert on third downs. Prairie View, you have to force 3 and outs. And I'm gonna say this: yes, MEAC schools are smaller than your SWAC schools, but MEAC schools do, like you just said, Nate. They lead the series. What'd you say? 3-6, 6-3.
6-3, yeah.
Yeah, they lead 6-3 over SWAC. So the SWAC still has something to prove in the celebration. Right now, the Celebration Bowl. I will say this is good in my opinion, and all love to Jackson State fans. But it's good that we're seeing a new SWAC team in the Celebration Bowl. We're getting to see a new face in the Celebration Bowl. One thing I do say about this, I do hate on the MEAC side that we did lose teams like North Carolina A&T and Hampton and Savannah State. Hopefully one day they can find their way back to the MEAC. But as of right now, it's good to see on the SWAC side. I think it's good to see a new face in the Celebration Bowl.
Yeah, that's why I had to bring that up too, dudes, because you did say I'm kind of hurt by it because I can't own it fully, but you said Jackson State basically has ran the last decade, and I think they ran the later years of the decade because I think this will be the 10th year of the Celebration Bowl. So in 2015, I think it was Alcorn and NCAT, and then Grambling was able to win. I think we were able to win one, and then we lost one.
We won, and then we lost, and then Alcorn went the next year.
Can I?
Alcorn has 3 appearances, and Jackson State has 3, so they're in the tie right now.
Can I be real, Nate?
What's up?
My dad used to tell me this, and he was a Grambling alumni, so his information could be wrong. But growing up, he always used to tell me that Jackson State was not considered a threat in the SWAC. Until Deion Sanders came along and he picked back up that program. And then throughout the years, throughout the last 3 or 4 years, Jackson State has been that team in the SWAC. But before Deion came, it was like Jackson State was kind of like in the middle, almost.
They were like Texas Southern and like Alabama A&M a little bit.
Right. So so that means my information is my dad's information is correct then. So
I will say this. I do say like Jackson State did have success in like the 90s and stuff like that.
Right.
But I do say like, the years like where Alcorn was dominating, Alcorn was dominating. That's where Jackson State kind of had, they were just the average. They had the average record.
Right.
Yeah. It for Mississippi SWAC schools, it was literally Alcorn, Jackson State, and then Mississippi Valley. And if Jackson State was worse than Mississippi Valley, it would be it was a crazy bad year.
That is true.
But that all that comes down is kind of like what I wanted to get into as far as like the buildup of everything. Because when we look at South Carolina State, they have a head coach who's back-to-back years and getting Coach of the Year 2024 and now 2025. And now it's going to be a 2025 versus 2025 Coach of the Year for SWAC and MEAC. Then we talk about the William Atkins guy from the quarterback from what's his name? William Atkins, if I'm not mistaken, from South Carolina State, and then Cam Peters. That's gonna be a matchup to look forward to. And before we get into the real in depth of it, the last time I remember a similar situation with a team that was very highly touted on defense, and it wasn't too crazy on offense, but they made it work well. Of course. The last time it was a defensive game where it was no more than 20 or 30 points scored, it was Grambling and North Carolina Central, which North Carolina Central, they were very high in putting pressure on the ball, getting sacks. They had a quarterback in Malcolm Bell who kept them in a lot of previous games. So it was a Malcolm Bell and Devontae Kincaid situation. I think the defense of Prairie View and them, like Deuce said, being able to have big time of possession in games, I'll be scared if it's a high scoring game in the 30s because that gives opportunity for these South Carolina State teams who are used to play big bomb after bomb after bomb on every single play. And I think if Tremaine Jackson can come in and can control the pace of time, I think we can see the SWAC down 6-4 instead of being down 7-3, and that can't happen. Tremaine Jackson, he's not doing this for Prairie View. He's doing this for the SWAC. He's doing this for more than just him.
Yeah, look, right now, normally it's, we're rooting against teams in the SWAC, but I think right now we all it's SWAC schools against the MEAC schools. We got to prove that we are the better conference. But look,
yeah,
I do got to speak positive on the MEAC schools because it is all love to HBCUs. But look, I say this players to watch, and look, you just mentioned William Atkins. Look, he spent 4 years at JMU, so he's already at a top program. Yes, he didn't pan out to how he wanted to, but it's panning out how he wants to. It is panning out how he wants to at South Carolina State. He's thrown for over 2,000 yards, 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He throws over 200 yards per game. That is something that Prairie View has to watch out for. Prairie View cannot allow big plays. This if you watch South Carolina State's offense all year, that's what they've been known for, big plays. That's what won them the game against Delaware State, big plays. I'm gonna say this: their running back, it may not be the best because look, Tyler Smith only 200-yard games, but one thing that South Carolina State does have on their edge is that they can really dig into the depth of South Carolina State's running back room. I believe it's 5 or 6 running backs on that depth chart that have over 100 yards. That is stuff that can be used to tire out Prairie View. This is something that I do give credit to Grambling. Grambling knows how to dive into that depth chart and start to use running backs. I've seen them go all the way down to Tony Phillips and start using him. So that's what I'm saying. South Carolina State, if you want to win and get through Prairie View's defense, who is already one of the best defenses, if not, I believe statistically the best defense in the SWAC, look, you're going to have to dive into that depth chart, and you're going to have to really open up that offense. I say this a lot, but South Carolina State with the defense like Prairie View, and this is not like, I'm going to say this, in my opinion, I think Prairie View has a shot to, have a better defensive game than they did last year. Last year, South Carolina State lost to Jackson State, and a lot of that is due to Jackson State's offense and defense. Prairie View's defense can really shut out South Carolina State's defense if they come up and put it to the test. That's what I'm saying. You got to really dive into your depth chart, even with receivers, Jordan Smith and Jalen Johnson. They're over 500 yards, but you even got wide receivers.
Jalen Johnson transfer from Grambling. That's what makes it scary as well. South Carolina just as balanced as Prairie we just played in this SWAC championship game against Jackson State. South Carolina's offense and their defense, they have at least 2 HBCU All-Americans that receive awards is all for the end of the season. And when you talk about the receivers, of course, I feel like they were low-key snubbed for a lot of different positions in the MEAC and as well as different HBCU awards. But Jalen Johnson and, like you said, Jordan Smith, those 2 guys, man, like those are playmakers. Those aren't regular, like I'm going to just give you the ball, maybe pass you the ball 4 or 5 yards and then you take it 20, 30 yards. No. They can catch it anywhere on the field. They may look smaller than the defenders, but they get up and they get the ball. Like those players play exceptionally well. So that would be the scariest thing for me to see is Jalen Johnson and Jordan Smith getting in between those lanes, or shaking a couple of defenders for Prairie View secondary. Because if they show one glimpse of that happening during a SWAC championship game, knowing how MEAC teams play, that would be a scary sight to see those 2 guys light up the field. So. That's one thing I'm kind of scared when it comes to South Carolina State. Those boys can play.
Look, and one thing I'm gonna give this real quick, Michael.
Go ahead.
One thing I will say about this, Prairie View, if you look on statistically, if you look at it, Prairie View, it may look like statistically Prairie View has shut out offensively better at every position. But one thing about this, I do say this, and I credit South Carolina State, is they have the depth, even better depth than Jackson State, in my opinion. They have the depth from positions that can hit you, from playmakers, and I'm gonna say this. Look, Prairie View, you got players like Josiah Rockwell that you got to watch out. You got your other few name players on the wide receiver in the wide receiver room and the running back room. But man, South Carolina State, they can hit you with players from wide receiver 5, 6, 7 in the depth chart, running backs 4 and 5 in the depth chart. They just have depth playmakers. And look, you said yourself, these players got snubbed. And I believe, South Carolina State's own backup quarterback is over 1,000-yard passer. So look, these are just players that can go all around. Prairie View, one thing about South Carolina State is, look, yes, you can focus on one player, but you still got to focus on your priority. Look, I'm gonna say your priority is to focus really on one player, but you got a game plan to focus on everybody else. But for Prairie View's game plan for South Carolina State, you have to game plan for an entire offense that can hit you left and right, that you don't know what's coming. And that's going to be South Carolina State's biggest advantage to beating Prairie View and getting past his defense. And like I said before, South Carolina State really go into the running back room, really run the ball. It may not look like it statistically, but if you really dive into the running back room, you can attack Prairie View and get them tired. You can attack them with different receivers. And different receivers, you got your deep threats. You got your players that can run the jet sweeps. You got your slot receivers. You got your, I can go on and on about South Carolina State. It's going to be a closer game than a lot of people think. And a lot of people come into the Celebration Bowl thinking, oh, the MEAC school is smaller conference. It's not going to be close. No, there's a reason why the MEAC leads in the Celebration Bowl 6-3. This game is going to be close, but I still have my eye on Prairie View simply because of how Prairie View has been playing all season against teams like Jackson State and Alabama State. And I say this, Jackson State has been in top 25 all season, or majority of the season, I believe.
Yeah.
Prairie View, and I say this, Prairie View knocked that team off in the SWAC championship. That's why I just have Prairie View with the advantage, but I'm not sleeping on South Carolina State because, like I said before, South Carolina State can hit you where it hurts with a lot of different players.
And Deuce, you made a valid point, and I did not want to interrupt you. I was going to let you finish, but we literally talked about which team got the depth at every position, but what position is the weakest link. And we talked, and I'm so glad that you brought that up because that's literally what I was just going to say. That's another thing that we have to understand about this Celebration Bowl. Regardless of South Carolina State in the MEAC conference, regardless of the series league, regardless of who's representing the SWAC, you gotta understand that when it comes down to the games like the Celebration Bowl, it all comes down to two things: team's weakest link. Okay, that's one thing, and then not only that, which team position got the depth, but is lacking at that position. Because let's say South Carolina State is slacking in the defensive back room. Let's say South Carolina State is lacking in the defensive line room. Let's say Prairie View is slacking in the receiver room, or the running back room, or the quarterback room, offensive line. All those things play a factor in this game, in any game, if you think about it. So that's kind of what you have to look when you look at these two teams. As dominant as Prairie View is, as dominant as South Carolina State is, you have to understand which team has a certain position, or which team has the weakest link on both sides of the ball, and which all them phases is going to be determined in this game. That's the thing that we have to understand. But I'm so glad that you brought that depth situation up, because I stay talking about that all the time. Depth matters. Whether it doesn't matter what team it is, depth matters. But what also matters is, do you have good enough players at that position?
And that's what South Carolina State does. And I'm gonna say this, statistically, it may not look the best, but South Carolina State has playmakers everywhere on that offense. And that's why I'm gonna say it's gonna be a close game. It's gonna be Jackson State had the edge last year because I think that's probably one of the best versions of Jackson State we saw, which was last year when they won the championship.
Right.
Prairie View, South Carolina State, I think this is going to be something new for South Carolina State, and I think it's going to be closer than a lot of people think. Yes, South Carolina State, the record doesn't reflect it, and they had, but they lost a couple early games to non-conference opponents.
Yeah.
Last year, South Carolina State had a better record, but I think this year's South Carolina State team is better than last year's South Carolina State team. Hence why I think this game is just going to be closer. And Prairie View, I just think it's going to be a better matchup for South Carolina State to compete with.
I think this game is going to come either a field goal or a touchdown, Deuce. But also the main question here is just how far will this game go? Will this game go into overtime, or will this game come down to a field?
I don't think it goes into overtime. I think whoever starts the game off and gets their foot off on the gas first and solidifies themselves as scoring offense and has their foot on the gas, I think they control their destiny and win out. And when it comes to the fourth quarter, I think all they got to do is close out. Do I think it's going to be a close game? Yes, but that's why I say this. Honestly, I think if Prairie View just goes into the fourth quarter leading the game, they can close it out, just like how they did against Jackson State. And they should have did it earlier against Jackson State had they not had that costly fumble at the 1 yard line.
But see, it's certain situations like that, Deuce, that you did. That is a good point. That which can Prairie View hold on to the lead going into the fourth quarter. But what you have to understand also is that Prairie View could have lost this game just with that fumble in the fourth quarter. So it really just determines that, which team is willing to cap off their destiny after this game, because let's make no mistake, this is the last game of the season for the SWAC and MEAC as far as football goes. So the destiny is upon the horizon. It's all going to matter is which team is able to reach to the highest mountaintop to grab that destiny and take it home with them. Basically, the flag. Let's say flag. Let's say each team is climbing to the flag, and you got one flag. It's only gonna take one team. One team can only take that Celebration Bowl trophy and take it back home to whether it's Prairie View or South Carolina State. The destiny is in the making in the Celebration Bowl, and Nate, I know you're big on destiny because you talk about it all the time in basketball and football. Destiny is a big key thing when it comes down to the season, because your destiny carries on to the next season. So in this game here, there are a lot of positives and negatives for Prairie View and South Carolina State. Prairie View is positive, elite defense. The Panthers' top-tier pass defense, allowing only 129 yards per game, and a strong overall defense. Number 2, strong offensive line. Prairie View's excellent pass protection, capable of handling South Carolina State's rush. Quarterback Karen Peters, we just talked about him, can extend plays and improvise and run, adding dynasty basically to his resume. Field position, better punting, flipping the field, because that also plays a factor. I don't know if people know this or not, but special teams play is going to matter in the Celebration Bowl. Let's be honest about that. Last thing, resilience. Can Prairie View show the ability to win despite turnovers like they did in the SWAC championship? Negatives, turnovers. Prairie View struggled with ball security with 3 turnovers in the SWAC title, which could have prevented them from losing this game. Quarterback consistency. Peters throws more NITs with 7, okay, than Atkins with 4. So let's also add that, okay? Offense, basically, for Prairie View. May struggle to move the ball consistently against South Carolina State's defense. We just talked about that. This is going to be a defensive battle game. I don't know if people know it or not. Call it what you want. But this game is a defensive battle game for sure.
I like that you mentioned Prairie View's, and I'm reading this really quick. Prairie View's defense has allowed fewer than 10 points in the last final 5 of 7 games. Note, they've allowed less than 10 points in the last final 5 of 7 games. Aside from Jackson State, that's something that you got to know. And look, we say this, is that going to play a factor when they come to South Carolina State, who has been high-powered all year, 31 points per game?
I'm not going to lie, dudes. Like, it's crazy how Michael set it off. You caught what Michael said, and then I've been thinking this the whole time of course, in the last, like you said, the last 5 of 7 games, they've allowed less than 10 points. When we actually look at it based off the whole schedule, when first game of the season, when Prairie View played against Texas Southern, we didn't know what type of team we're going to see from Texas. We didn't know what the identity was going to be at all until we talked to Scoob. We got to get a little more in depth on how Texas Southern season went. But that game was 22-21, and Tremaine Jackson's first game trying to basically get his feet wet in the SWAC. So he won that by 1 in his first SWAC game. 2 out of conference games, 3 out of conference games. Then you finally see Grambling in your second game, and Grambling basically threw whatever they could at you, and you basically prevailed, and you were able to start 2-0 in the SWAC West, and that was 28-13. You moved to Alcorn. You end up going on the road to Alcorn State. We all know how we talked about it with Amarion Blakes as well. Alcorn is not a place that you want to be at. Tremaine Jackson won by 1 point, 13-12. That was a big game to go on the road in Lawrence, Mississippi, in the middle of nowhere in the reservation. We know this. He won by 1. He went to Southern's homecoming. Southern having probably the worst year in program history. He goes to their homecoming and literally in the rain, is muddy, is wet, is not a place you want to be. If you're Southern, you have to win that game. Tremaine Jackson, he wins at Southern's homecoming. You go against Alabama State on the road. You end up losing by 3 points, but it was 31-28. You basically, when teams force Prairie View's hand, they don't fold. They don't hold their tongue. they find a resolution. It's comeback season, it's clapback season for Tremaine Jackson. So even though he lost that game, he still only lost by 3, less than one possession game right there. Then he plays A&M, Arkansas Pine Bluff, Mississippi Valley, and they all closes them to less than 9 points. Arkansas Pine Bluff was the only team to have 9. Alabama A&M had 5. Mississippi Valley had 6. And then, of course, in the SWAC championship game, you beat Jackson State 23-21. And like I said, I predicted it to be 24-20. And it ended up being, a 2-point game. So when Prairie View's hand is being forced, they show up to the occasion. They're showing it, and it's in full proof. And I think when it comes down to them being able to go against Chennis, head coach Chennis over there for South Carolina State, this is going to be an ultimate showdown. And I think this is why I'm gonna ride the train up until somebody can tell me that I'm wrong. Prairie View is showing me that when their hand is forced, I'm gonna say it again, they show up to the occasion.
For sure. I'm gonna do this real quick and I'm gonna give it back to you. South Carolina State's positives and negatives. I'm gonna start with their positives. Disruptive defense. South Carolina State strong pass rush, 31 sacks, and are good in the red zone. Let's make no mistake. It's Prairie View is gonna have a hard time scoring on South Carolina State defense in the red zone. Let's be clear about that. Quarterback William Atkins IV, clean pocket passer, low interception rate with just 4. Okay. Kicker, senior Nico. I don't know how to say his last name. I think it's Can. I don't know how to say his last name. Y'all forgive me. But Nico is a reliable field goal option. He has a really good field goal percentage for South Carolina State. So I think he's also going to play a big factor. Negatives for South Carolina State. Pass defense. South Carolina State gives up more passing yards than Prairie View. That's just short. I could go more detail with that if I wanted to, but I had to make that just short and plain. Offense can struggle to move the ball, needing big plays or mistakes. That's just the reality of it. And then offensive line faces a tough test against Prairie View strong protection. Now, make no mistake, Prairie View has a good defensive line. They showed that in the Jackson State game. Key matchups. Defense versus defense and quarterback play. Prairie View's strength is its defense against South Carolina State's offense. Panthers style pass defense and O-line face South Carolina State's dangerous pass rush and improved quarterback. Number 2, South Carolina State's strength is its defense against Prairie View's offense. But here it is. Prairie View's O-line is good at pass protection. Third thing, game hinges on which quarterback style prevails. Atkins' precisions or Peters' improvements, basically. Or, last thing, field position and big plays / mistakes will likely decide the low-scoring affair. This game is going to come down to which team can and will have turnovers, and that's the reality of it.
Yeah, Michael, I'm not going to follow that on your point, and this will probably be a little bit of my final remark on what the conclusion of the seesaw battle, a little bit of what's going on. South Carolina, they have 33 sacks on the season for their defense, and they have 14 interceptions. They actually lead the MEAC, if I'm not mistaken, with the most interceptions in the MEAC with 14, and I think it's another team that trails them with 13. But their defense is very opportunistic. They get a lot done. They try to basically they throw a lot of traps at you, a lot of trap doors at you, and of course Prairie View's defense a little bit more disciplined. When we've been talking a lot about Prairie View's defense, of course, like you just said, with the defense action, the defensive action, and then the quarterback play. Seeing how what's his name, Cameron Peters able to improvise, and then Atkins able to be in a clean pocket and be able to air it out where he can. The difference is it's not that big of a difference. South Carolina State on the whole year has a total of 3,400 plus passing yards, and Prairie View has a total of 3,000, maybe like 83 passing yards. They're both in the 3,000 range. I think it all comes down to situational football, we know what's set in stone on paper. We know what we seen in the film room. We know the different the atmosphere that comes from both programs. I think it comes down who can play situational football the most, and that comes back to my last take of what I just said of every time Prairie View their hand is forced, they show up to the occasion. So I think it comes down to who's going to play situational football, and South Carolina's been there the last 2 years, and this will make their second and third appearance in a row. And it's time for Tremaine Jackson to show them after just coming from the Division II national championship. Now you're on the big stage of all HBCUs. This is situational football here.
You know, look, I'm gonna say this before we jump to our next topic. If Tremaine Jackson can win this, I think he's just probably had the best come up story for a head coach, in my opinion, for this season in general, and probably in the last 5 seasons I've heard of. You know, you're coming from a D2 division, and you know, a lot of people say, oh, we should just go dive in and get a Hall of Famer, and you know, we say Hall of Famer or, you know, NFL coach, somebody that's more experienced. But Prairie View, they went into a Division II. They pulled him and they took him. And look, a lot of people are going to say, look, and I'm going to say this. He was very successful in the Division II. Look, he was very successful. But the fact that you just put your trust into a Division II coach, bring him up to the Division I FCS play, SWAC play at that, you win the SWAC, you beat Jackson State in the vet at their own home stadium. Mind you, and I'm sorry to Jackson State fans, y'all are the first team to lose a championship game on y'all's own home field. I'm sorry for y'all to hear that. I'm sorry that y'all got to hear that. It's a tough one to hear that.
It's just like that, bro.
Yeah, and then you take your team to the Celebration Bowl. If you win the Celebration Bowl, I think, like, do I say other look? And yes, of course, other colleges are gonna start looking. But I think he should stay committed to Prairie View and continue to build what he already started, because what he has is something.
70% of his team is transfers.
Mm-hmm. And look, players are gonna want to come to. I say this: when you start to see team success, players are gonna start to want to come to Prairie View. Yeah. He can continue to build a program that is already started and that he's already started to build. And look, Prairie View could be a team to dominate. You never know the SWAC for the next 5-10 years if everything goes on the trajectory. Prairie View, look, we saw a glimpse of where Prairie View can really be for the next, and they're only going to get better as the seasons progress. Yes, do I think other SWAC teams are going to get better? Yes, but Prairie View is going to be, I think they're going to be at top of the SWAC for years to come, just by off of how this season is. And you got to think, this team is still going to recruit very well. But I do want to get into our next topic. T.C.Taylor, despite him losing in the championship game, there have been, you know, I did read an article that said, look, he would make a great fit at Southern Miss. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
Michael, did you want to take it?
Nah, I'll let you start, Nick.
Okay. I'm not too fond of the head coach. I know it's an African-American coach over there at Southern Miss, and he's been doing a good job. He's actually turned around the program a little bit. And if I'm not mistaken, Jackson State and Southern Miss played each other earlier during the season in a close battle, and Jackson State almost won before finally losing. But T.C.Taylor to Southern Miss, that actually scares me. I wouldn't want to even partake in that. I'm pretty sure if there's opportunities in it for T.C.Taylor, yeah, but for all I care, I think Jackson State is probably the most notable. You got Ole Miss and Mississippi State, but as far as like teams that has like a fan base, we talk about how they show up on FCS level. Jackson State is one of those staples in Mississippi. I don't think you should leave that.
For sure, without a doubt. And you know, in my opinion, I didn't even know nothing about that, dudes, until you had put it, sent the script to us.
I know it was crazy. It was crazy when I seen the article. I was like, And look, I'm gonna say this.
Surprised.
And look, and they were saying this, and mainly just due to the pipeline that if Southern Miss, because Southern Miss is looking to get a top of their conference. And look, their reasoning is, look, T.C. Taylor's had the pipeline in Mississippi that can bring these players to Southern Miss to get atop the conference. But I mean, look, Nate made a good point. When you have a fan base like Jackson State, and you're already, whether you like it or not, Jackson State is still atop of the SWAC, and can always get back to, you know, where they were last season.
Right.
Nate made a good point. Why just leave that when you already have it outside of, you know, Ole Miss? Jackson State, in my opinion, is just the next best notable thing. Or you know, Mississippi State, but Jackson State is right up there.
Yeah,
that's one of the few states where Jackson State is like actually like in contention as far as the atmosphere and like the actual community. Because it's not a lot of states like, you know, in Louisiana you got Southern, you got Grambling, but a lot. What about LSU? What about Tulane? You know, they come a little bit heavier.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And I'm gonna say this: in the state of Mississippi, football is very competitive in just that one state in general. I think we can all agree on that. But when it comes down to Jackson State as a HBCU, I don't think none of those big schools, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Southern Miss, it's a different atmosphere when you're at a HBCU. The band, the fan base, that's something that most big schools like Southern Miss and Ole Miss, Mississippi State don't really have. And like people say all the time, HBCUs, a lot of people don't think about how big of an impact HBCUs are compared to big schools. Because let's be honest, big schools, they really just got the team, but they ain't got the band, or they don't have the band, they got the fan base. But HBCUs, they have all categories. Jackson State has that fan base. Jackson State has that band. So Jackson State has that team. So when you compare Jackson State to all those three big school teams I just listed, Jackson State has more excitement just in that journey because they're HBCUs. And like Deuce, we talked about this when Grambling went to play Ohio State. Them people didn't know nothing about Grambling and what Grambling was capable of. But the band was real surprised on the tone of music that came from y'all. You want to know why? Because big schools are nothing compared to how HBCU's bands play. HBCU band, whether it's Grambling World Fame, whether it's Jackson State Sonic Boom, it doesn't matter.
It's the overall support.
HBCUs in general. That's why Battle of Bands is an event, because HBCU bands, they set the tone on what the definition of HBCUs are. You got you got kids from overseas coming to play for some of these HBCU
Look,
bands.
I'm gonna say this about the band thingy. If you would have seen how the Ohio State crowd reacted when we marched off that field and when we marched on that field, that would have been like, you would have been like, wow, like you just have to, you just kind of have to see it for you. And look, I say this, I think CBS Sports, they posted like some video. We were playing neck, and like Ohio State's band was right there, and some lady or some girl in the band like jumped because she heard how loud it was.
Yeah.
Like, that's just, I mean, you just read the comments and you like, that's just stuff they're not used to. I'm saying this, that's the part that really just makes, you know, the HBCU stand out, in my opinion, for the PWIs. And look, if I'm T.C.Taylor, I have something good going at Jackson State. My name is very notable out there in the coaching. I'm sure we could get coaching gigs from, you know, higher FBS schools, you know, even probably G5 schools, you know, probably they be calling his name. But what he has at Jackson State, you know, along with, you know, Tremaine Jackson, I think you just don't leave that. And I think you're a coach that when you have your seat like 100% secured, I think you continue to build. I say this, I'm one person, I think I'm a person that believes in program building. I believe that coaches, if the opportunity is presented, you take it. But if it's not presented, I don't believe that you should really try to go out and, you know, try to go out and get, you know, said opportunity. I think, and you know, people may have their opinions on that, but look, I think a coach like T.C.Taylor's in a good spot right now. And I said it again, you just don't give that up. And you can always look to rebuild and shake back, not even rebuild, but just look to shake back and get back to the top for next year. But jumping into our next topic, it's been a lot of people, you know, a lot of people have been talking about this. Should the SWAC remove divisions? And, you know, it comes with its positives and it comes with its negatives. Some positives. It opens up to, you really get your true 1 and 2 number 2 team. The argument before was we get our true number 1 and 2 teams, which were before what the whole SWAC thought was Alabama State and Jackson State in the championship game. We know that now that Prairie View beat Jackson State, so we call them the true number 1 team in the SWAC. Nate, what are your thoughts on that if the SWAC was to remove divisions?
Man. I ain't gonna lie. As much as I love FCS and the HBCU sports community, it would heighten a lot of stakes, honestly. But one situation that happened this year for the what was the SEC championship, I think Texas A&M lost to Texas.
Yeah, they lost to Texas.
And then they only lost 1 game, and it still confused me based off, I guess, scheduling. Alabama still found a way to get into the SEC championship game. So I kind of thought about that a little bit of how scary it would have to be for the standing. I think divisions being in a SWAC kind of give you a little bit more structure on if it's like 2 or 3 teams with a 10-1 record or 10-1 record overall, and maybe like 6-1 or 7-1 in the SWAC. Then you have to allow the tiebreaker, and if things are too close, then you're allowing the SWAC to basically choose who's going to be the top 2 teams, and that's how you get all that controversy and all that. So division definitely does that. Yeah. So like divisions make the structure of it, of course, but people are kind of upset. I'm upset that I didn't get to see like the best 2 teams were in one division in Alabama State and Jackson State, and that you kind of want to see that. Like, who doesn't want to see that? So I mean, Tremaine Jackson, I want to see him times 10, but this was a situation where it was completely. It could have easily been Tremaine Jackson. We wouldn't be talking about him at all. That's the best. We've been talking about Coach Eddie Robinson over there at Alabama State and T.C.Taylor, and we don't know how that would have ended because they already played each other once in the season. So that it's scheduling, divisions, and the overall landscape of who would ultimately get in, depending on who's the best in the SWAC. It's kind of tricky. So would I take the divisions? It takes away a little bit from the history, but who said you can't start new history?
Right. And I'm gonna basically say this. I took notes on that real quick before we started, and this is just different side on what people have been saying. So there have been arguments for eliminating the division. Basically, people are saying one big division. The first thing that I got from some people that it guarantees top teams. What I mean by that is the primary argument is that 2 teams with the best overall records will play in the championship, create a more decisive number 1 versus number 2 game, as seen in 2025 season when strong teams like Alabama State missed out. Fan desire. Many fans feel that this format would better showcase the best of conference. Number 3, best teams play. The main desire is to see the absolute 2 best teams in the conference face off, right? Number 4, more playoff opportunities. Some fans feel single division or a large playoff bracket potentially merging with the MEAC would offer more chances for teams to compete for championships. Last thing, excitement. The East and West structure creates rivalries and excitement, and the championship game itself is a major financial and competitive event for the league. Now, here are arguments against eliminating the division. Basically, the current system that's happening right now. It avoids scheduling nightmares. Commissioner McMillan points out, he literally said this, that divisionless format makes it harder to ensure that every team plays each other, leading to the potential ties of complex tiebreakers, which he compares to issues in other conferences. Second thing, rewards divisional success. The current system ensures a champion from both East and West, rewarding teams for winning their respective divisions, even if their overall record isn't absolute the best. Last thing, maintains rivalries / balance. Divisions help structure schedules and maintain traditional matchups. Commissioner McMillan's stance on this. He believes, from the video that we both, all three of us saw, he believes eliminating division doesn't guarantee the absolute best teams play, as imbalances still occur and it creates scheduling difficulties. Last thing, he prefers current structure where winning your division is the path to the championship. Now, in summary, the debate centers whether the SWAC prioritizes, a potential fair but logic complex, both best teams match up, no divisions, or a structured rivalry-rich system that guarantees divisional champions current system, with commissioner leaning towards the latter to avoid chaos. Now, if you would have asked me, in my opinion, should this happen, I think it should just stay the way it is. Because growing up, I've always seen that whoever wins the East and whoever wins the West play in the SWAC championship. I don't think the SWAC commissioner should touch it, because the SWAC is not the SEC. The SWAC is not the Big Ten. The SWAC is not the Big 12. The SWAC is the SWAC itself. But what makes the SWAC more competitive is that when you have two divisions instead of one big whole list full of teams, and then you got one team missing out that's got a good record. And like you just said, when Texas A&M lost to, I think you said Alabama somehow.
Texas.
What was that?
That Texas A&M lost to Texas, and then Alabama somehow.
Yeah, somehow Alabama was able to make it to the SEC championship. So now you see the reason why it should not happen, because it's going to make it more confusing. Let's just say this, you might as well just say you can switch Alabama State to the West, and somebody takes Alabama State's spot and put them in the East with Jackson State. You can do it that way, but will it make sense? Probably not.
And
but
it wouldn't based off regional standpoint.
And like,
I think SWAC should touch it.
A lot of things with college football, a lot of things with college sports, you got to look at the geography of things. The way that the SWAC West is, you got your Louisiana team, and you got your
Texas team, Arkansas,
team,
and then you got one Mississippi school.
Was in Jackson State's division. Alcorn was in Jackson State's division for the longest until BCU and FAMU came and joined the conference. Right. I'm looking at this because I think about the Big Ten when I think about conference play. The Big Ten, the reason for that they removed the divisions is, one, it's the guarantee that the two best teams played in the championship game. So yes, removing divisions, it has its positives and it has its negatives. Yes, it ensures that you can get the two best teams in the championship, but it does create, like we said with the SEC and the Big Ten, it creates issues amongst strength of schedule, head-to-head. We could have a three-way tie, and then you're like, okay, now you got to worry about head-to-head. Now you got to worry about strength of schedule, and that's so confusing. The divisions, look, although it doesn't look, and I'm going to say this one more thing about the no divisions. It creates more, it takes away from the traditional rivalries and puts in place protected rivalries. And, exactly. That's things that, this as a SWAC, we actually want to see. We want to see Jackson State versus Alcorn every year. We want to see, Grambling versus Alcorn.
Alabama A&M versus Alabama State, Magic City.
You just want to see those matchups every year. And I think without, the divisions, it takes away from that. But with the divisions, I'm going to say this. With the divisions, it creates, like you said before, Nate, it creates more structure. Yes, I do say this is a bummer. Yes, how much I would like to play FAMU more. I would like to play Valley more, because, those are just teams I don't see Grambling play often, but at what cost? And I think with the divisions right now, one, it creates a better opportunity for you to get a chance to, win go to the championship game. You're not fighting against, the rest of the SWAC. You're fighting against 5 other teams in that conference and probably 2 other non-players in your division. And you have a better shot to go to the championship without having the conference. But I'm gonna say this: if I was a SWAC commissioner, I keep the divisions. Having just a conference full of non-divisions creates more chaos. It works for teams like smaller divisions like the MEAC, even like with Power 5, like Power 4 schools and G5 schools, it works better for them because they're smaller. But the SWAC, you have a decent amount of teams and you have a decent amount of good teams. And when it comes down to it, that's just something that you don't want to have to deal with. when it boils down to it. But Michael, and you said, look, maybe have like a team switch with maybe have a team switch from maybe like have Prairie View or have Alabama State go to Gremlins division. But I'm gonna say this, then that's gonna hurt some of your matchups. You may not get to see them play Alabama A&M every year. You may not get to see your brewing rivalries, like for instance Jackson State and Alabama State. At the rate this is going, this could be an annual matchup that people are looking forward to every year. You move Alabama State out that division, you don't get to see that. You don't get to see, I could just go, I could go on and on all day.
That's true. That is true.
But I'm gonna say this before I jump to our next topic. Divisions, it's the best for the SWAC play. One, people always say this, should the SWAC expand? No, I think other HBCU conferences should expand. I don't think the SWAC should expand. How the SWAC is currently performing right now is how they should continue to perform for years to go. Look, I think right now is the SWAC is really trying to get more attention, way more attention. What platforms like HBCU Go and SWAC TV and more ESPN2 and ESPN Plus features. Everything is looking right for the SWAC. I think how the SWAC is formatted is a good blueprint for how other HBCU conferences should format their stuff. But one thing before we look into HBCU basketball, Andrew Body named top HBCU player of the year. Michael, from the get-go, even from their game against UAB, Michael, we said, look, Andrew Body was a player that best player. Michael, we were high on him since basically his first game. Look, and we said this was a team that the SWAC's gonna have to watch out. And we're gonna say, and we said this, Michael, Andrew Body was what was going to win the SWAC had he not got hurt and had they beat Jackson State. And look, our prediction was semi-true. They had a great season. They fell short to Jackson State. They had their shot to win at like the goal line. They didn't score. But Jackson State closed out the season. I mean, Alabama State, they closed out the season. Andrew Body's played like the best player in the SWAC all year. Nate, what are your thoughts on that?
Andrew Body, just kind of like what we've been waiting on. It just sucks that the intangibles of his injury has derailed him a little bit towards the later ends of each season. But this is a guy who's been in the SWAC since 2021. I'm looking at it right now. Since he's been in the SWAC, he started off with Texas Southern. He had 3 years with Texas Southern. He has 2 years with Alabama State. 421 of 702 completed passes. That's a 60% range of the last 5 years. He's passed for 5,905 yards, 47 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. His longest pass being 69 yards. And I mean, from there, it doesn't stop. His rushing yards, he has 321 attempts for 1,936 yards and 15 TDs rushing. So Andrew Body, he's been bodying it, basically. That's the best way to put it.
Look, I said this. Andrew Body, I told Michael when Michael gets back, when he does get back, I said this. Andrew Body was going to be the one to lead that Alabama State offense to levels that we probably haven't seen in a while. And I really do believe that he opened up that offense, and this is his breakout season. Look, right. Michael, from the get-go, what have we been saying about Andrew Body?
Yep. We've literally done talk from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet about just how dominant. And
we done talked to him so much that we've got his parents to comment on ourselves. That's how much we talked to Andrew Body, and it's died down in the later weeks because we've had to cover them these classic games like Grambling and Southern and the championship game. But when we first started this, we were covering Andrew Body so much people would think that we were fanboys of him. But look, it all paid off because look at the end.
Hey, we might as well get the Andrew Body jerseys going.
Look, because what happened at the end, everything that we said about Andrew Body came true, and this is why he's an all-around top HBCU player of the year.
I mean, the stats literally, present itself. I'm just gonna start from the introduction, just work my way down. I only got 2 bullet points for y'all. That's just plain and simple. But Andrew Body was named Southwestern Athletic Conference Offensive Player of the Year after leading the league in touchdown passes with 20 and points responsible for 144 and ranking second in completion percentage with 70.5. He earned the SWAC Offensive Player of the Week 3 times and HBCU National Player of the Week twice. And here's why. Andrew Body completed 113 of 160 passes for 1,770 yards with 20 touchdowns and an interception this season. Also rushing for 518 yards and 4 scores. Last thing, the season included several standout performances. Also highlighted, here it is. I think this is what's really going to get y'all. His 6 touchdown outing against Alabama A&M. Can't see and tell me, but I honestly feel that Andrew Body is an NFL prospect.
He gives me flashes of Devontae Kincaid. He honestly gives me flashes of Devontae Kincaid. And I'm gonna say this
Literally.
To the extent, look, I feel like he didn't have as much weapons, but he shows me little flashes, and I kind of see it. It's a bummer that he didn't go to the SWAC championship, and he's not able to go to the Celebration Bowl. But Michael, you said he's an NFL prospect. I really do believe that NFL teams they're going to look at the SWAC in the draft, and they're going to have the SWAC team players going in the later rounds, your day 3. I think Andrew Bye is a perfect quarterback, to go into the NFL, and players are, quarterback 2, your quarterback 3, your backup quarterback, and eventually get to that starting level caliber. Andrew Body, you're going to see him at these HBCU legacy games, and you're going to see him at the Senior Bowl. Hopefully, as the offseason rolls around. Look, I got all high hopes for Andrew Body and his career going forward.
Yeah, I think the future is bright for Andrew Body, and and I hope his parents somehow, some way come back on, because the talent is there in Andrew Body, the arm strength is there in Andrew Body, the accuracy is there for Andrew Body. I can go on and on. His speed, like you said, he kind of reminds you of Devontae Kincaid. But I think what's really going to the difference between Andrew Body and Devontae Kincaid is that Andrew Body, if he doesn't, he should. But I think Andrew Body is going to become an NFL prospect, and not compared to Devontae Kincaid, because
he already is. He already is.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, Devontae Kincaid could have really been an NFL prospect as well. Let's not forget, Devontae Kincaid was that quarterback. Right. So I honestly think that Andrew Body is a name that the NFL people should not sleep on. Even though, yes, he played for, but this is also another thing. This is good for HBCUs because, dudes, I've talked about this before. Back then, HBCU players like Doug Williams, like Shaq Harris, the list goes on. It was coaches like Eddie Robinson that built HBCUs to what they are now. Back then, HBCU players used to get drafted with just a nickel of an eye. But now it's hard for HBCU players to get drafted regardless of the football level that they play in. But it's guys like Andrew Body that should be in that category to be in the NFL draft because of the fact that, yes, he is playing at HBCU. But at the same time, HBCUs, a lot of players were drafted more back then compared to this generation now. So it's guys like Andrew Body. If we can get more guys like Andrew Body to flip the script, to get HBCUs back to that category, to where teams like Grambling, with teams like Southern, with teams like Jackson State can get guys to the NFL draft, this is the way to do it, in my opinion.
I agree. Look, I'm glad that the NFL is starting to open up programs like, the Legacy Bowl, the Senior Bowl, stuff like that to really get the HBCU players, names open up. But before we close this out, I do want to mention that I did say next week that we will be starting HBCU basketball. Look, I hate that right now it's not conference play, but when conference play is like when when you can really start to, break it down, in my opinion, because I'm gonna say this, I hate non-conference matchups. And although I say this in basketball, it is closer because we have seen a few upsets on the women's side and on the men's side, and we've seen a few near upsets. We're almost seeing Bethune-Cookman upset Auburn at the beginning of the year. And I say this, it is easy for basketball for an HBCU to upset a big time school. But I will say this: when you're playing, and the reason I guess I haven't really started to break down HBCU basketball yet is because like I'm just looking at it right now. You got teams that are like still got one win on the year. You can't
I
really
mean,
break
yeah,
down.
it's just like football when you got the 1 through 12 of the teams in the SWAC. You can get a glimpse from a lot of different teams. I mean, A&M, Coach Dante Jackson is over there. Grambling has Coach Patrick Craig. The only thing with Grambling and Coach Patrick Craig's squad right now is being able to finish at the end. They've been in every fourth quarter of this season. I can tell you, I've been watching nothing but Grambling basketball. Every fourth quarter, it's just if they don't already have a lead already through the first 3 quarters, that fourth quarter is one of them. Like they can have the lead or they can be down by a 2 or 3 possessions. They just have to finish. That's the only take for Grambling so far is being able to finish.
I'm gonna say this real quick. My prediction with Graham is that they're going to finish what they had last season, what they left off on last season. And look, I know we haven't we're the basketball season is just getting started, but look, this Grambling basketball team has shown flashes throughout the season, and I know the record may not show it yet. Conference play hasn't started. The fact that they were able to get almost to the championship game last year, they were one game away. Gremlins basketball team has been known to being good recently. I really think they're just going to build off on that success. And with their new head coaching hire, I think that really is going to help Gremlin for the better.
Exactly. Then you got to think about this too. Alabama A&M taking Dante Jackson because, make no mistake, Dante Jackson was that guy for Grambling. And to be honest, dudes, me and you talked about this. It was kind of a surprise when he went to Alabama A&M. And we talked about this on a podcast. At first we thought that it was something going on inside Grambling basketball that we didn't know nothing about. But apparently it's a connection thing with the athletic director over there at Alabama A&M. So, at first I was
as athletic director Brian Howard, who was with Grambling for quite a while before he went to A&M.
Right. So then you bring in Patrick McCreary and the knowledge and the knowledge of basketball that he has, and it's shown already in just this season in general. Like the SWAC play hasn't even started yet, but you just see the dominance of the coaching that he has. He brought in the staff, to bring the competitiveness back to Grambling, regardless of Dante Jackson leaving and taking some of the staff with him. So Patrick McCreary has.
I think when it comes down to Michael, like how you finna say Patrick Craig, Dante Jackson, I think when it comes with him, he fulfilled his contract when it comes to Grambling. Grambling basketball, we know about Grambling football being above 500 for years and years. Grambling basketball, this is a test of my mom. My mom has even told me when she went to Grambling High School, she went to Grambling University. For a long time, they would have the boys play first because they were such a bad program, and they would let the girls play last because the girls were just so much better than the dudes.
Right.
But when it comes to this season, when it comes to Dante Jackson, he fulfilled the contract of getting Grambling's program above 500 again. So now he can go take off and go elevate at Alabama A&M. Patrick Curry was the best rebound of a head coach you can get when it comes to Grambling. So that to answer your question about Dante Jackson, he fulfilled the contract, and Patrick Curry, he's here to elevate what Dante Jackson set in the foundation.
And then you got to think about this too. Patrick McCreary was the guy at Florida A&M, but they didn't, according to Florida A&M people, they did not treat him the right way, which caused him to leave that job, and which caused Grambling to pick him up, because Patrick McCreary, some people don't know, he was actually that guy for Florida A&M. But a lot of Rattler fans were saying that they do not blame him for leaving for what has been going on with that university. So you bring in Patrick McCreary, he brings in his staff, and then not only that, he brings in recruits and the transfers, and now you see the dominant effect. They literally just beat Southern Miss. Okay, I don't care what conference Southern Miss is in. They showed the competitiveness. They beat them at Grambling. Okay,
Look, Michael, I hate to cut this off. Look, the fact that you can go 1-1 with Southern Miss, and I hate that they should have beat them last week or when they played them a few days ago. I think a few fourth quarter because I tuned into the game late. Few fourth quarter mishaps that didn't go the way. But look, You literally beat Southern Miss at home, Michael. That should say a lot. And a Southern Miss, a very good G5 program.
Literally. So you see the competitiveness that Patrick McCrary has brought in just that one season in general. Because when me and you talked about this, when they first hired Patrick McCrary, I'm like, okay, this is a step in the right direction, but we're gonna see how recruiting goes. He killed recruiting, in my opinion. I think he did. He brought in the right talented guys. He even brought some guys from Florida A&M who are real good ball players for him. You bring that along, and
I had a chance to interview Patrick Curry right after the Southern Miss game when we won, and the main thing he had said in the interview after asking him a various different questions was, "We're coming for the NBA model. We're not taking any guards. Basically no less than 6'3", 6'4", because Rod Coffey, the guy that he brought with him from Florida A&M." He's 6'4", and he's a game managing point guard. Then you got Antonio Munoz. He's number 15. He's 6'6" freshman. The only thing that Grambling lacks this season would probably be as far as the size. But the size that we lack, our bigs, they're very physical, so they kind of that takes up for the weakness they have in height. But Patrick Curry, he's not here. He's a go getter. He's a hustler.
Yeah, it all in recruiting, and like I said, I think. Patrick McCrary can be, and the roster that he has, it could be a dangerous effect in SWAC play. I think, and then, I'm going to change topic here, and then I'm going to flip back. That's like with Southern women, the Lady Jags. They literally just beat 2 Power 5 schools. They beat Arizona. Arizona was undefeated when the Lady Jags played them. They beat them. And then, not only that, the next game, they beat Houston. So you starting to kind of see that the SWAC play in general, when you bring in the right coach, that plays a huge factor in on competing against these Power 5 schools. So make no mistake, Grambling, women's and men's side of the ball can be a dominant effect. Now, women's side, the women have struggled to find ways to hold on against these Power 5 schools. They just played Louisiana Tech, the Lady Texans. I think they could have held on a lot longer than they should have, because the Lady Texans had not really been so hot, but it was a lot of mishaps in that game that caused the score to be what it was. But I think as far as Patrick McCrary goes, I think the future is bright as far as SWAC play. And it's only going to get better and better from here. Now, as far as Courtney Simmons goes, she has the caliber of bringing in talent. She just brought in an assistant coach who is well known. Okay, let's make no mistake, she's well known. So the women's side of the ball, I think it's going to come down to, can you play as well as Southern did? Because last year it was kind of tough for the Lady Tigers to hold on against the Lady Jags. So I guess the main question here is, for Grambling and women's side, what is next in the SWAC play compared to last year? Is it going to be a lot better? Is it going to be worse? I think that's what we have to. Now, I can go more into this, but for the sake of time, I think Patrick McCrary is going to make his name well known. And I think Courtney Simmons, she's just going to add on to her resume, as she's already done in her coaching for the Lady Tigers.
And look, I'm going to say this before we close this out, because we are reaching our time limit. Look, one thing about Graham, look, they may start 3-6 and non-conference play, but I would say this: they've had some pretty close games. We mentioned they lost by 8 points to Southern Miss, and again, that they should have won. You lose by 2 points to Tulane. You lose by 10 points to San Diego.
Right.
So it's been a bunch of close games, and I'm gonna say this: we're starting. You play Norfolk and Hampton, which are 2 games I really think that Grambling can win. You beat Howard 73-70. And I have my opinions about Hampton and Norfolk State's basketball program, but I really think after this Ohio State game that they play on the 23rd, when you really open this SWAC play, these are games that you really get to see Gremlins full form. And this is where you really get to see is, okay, how are these coaching hires shaped, for Alabama A&M, and how they shaped for Grambling this season, how they shaped for FAMU this season. So it's going to be a lot to play. But, that's just like a little preview into our SWAC and our HBCU basketball. But look, closing this out, I always say this, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Our goal on this is 500 views. Also, our goal is 500 subscribers. We are at 274 right now. Let's get this video. This video got to get us. Yes, this video has to at least get us to 285 subscribers. So our next Inside the Locker Room video can get us to 300. Our goal by February is to get to 500. But I say this as always, thank you for watching Inside the Locker Room. This video will be uploaded really soon. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and also make sure you send out our videos and you share all of our Instagram reels. I know I got some with me, Nate, and Michael interviewing our Texas Southern friend, and also I got a few other ones with our us interviewing some players from Alcorn. So just please get our Instagram reels active. We're trying to get that back up, and make sure you stay tuned for tomorrow. We got a big one. It's three. We got 3 guests on a regular Inside the Locker Room pod, episode 31. We'll be talking, look into the NFL for I think this is week 15. We'll be looking into that. Then we'll be talking some NBA basketball. So it's going to be a lot that you don't want to miss. And I keep saying this December, it's going to be content left and right. But as always, thank you for watching, and thank you for tuning into Inside the Locker Room.
Grace and peace, y'all.